We are live in downtown Toronto at the US-Canada Summit, co-hosted by BMO and Eurasia Group all day and towards this afternoon. Delegates are talking about the state of relations between the U.S. and Canada, especially at a couple of crucial points. The U.S. election is one of them. For a look at the state of affairs and how to think about things going forward, we've got somebody who knows, former Principal Secretary to Prime Minister of Canada, Justin Trudeau, and current Vice Chair of Eurasia Group. Thanks so much for joining us, Jerry. But I guess I should say your name instead of just all of your titles. But great to have you join us. And I think everybody's trying to understand the major flashpoint in front of us is the election in the U.S. At stake for Canadians. What do you say to business leaders?
Well, I think you're feeling an understandable mood of anxiety that, on the one hand, we've been through this before. Still have the PTSD to remind myself of it, the first Trump administration. So there is a playbook in Canada for how to manage this, and that's to accentuate the positive. It's to draw on the deep business ties. It's part of why we're having this summit here in Toronto, just to make all of those things that we tend to take for granted a little more apparent for people, and to work hard to put the positive economic and data in front of whoever wins the election in November. But there's no question that most Canadians, I think, would prefer the Biden administration to continue, but we've been through a lot in our relationship with the United States, so you've got to deal with whoever the U.S. picks as their president.
It's interesting you say PTSD, because I think speaking to a lot of business leaders, they still our largest trading partner, the border is still, intact there. Did trade meaningfully fall off? Did they cut us off? Not really. What are the concerns for a second, maybe more emboldened administration?
I think the main concern is that you get a Trump administration populated by people who have a better sense of what they're doing the second time around. That in any presidential administration, the first 16 to 18 months are the most critical. In their system, by the time you're in the second half of the second year, you're already thinking about midterms. It's an unusual situation next year that insofar as whoever wins the election will automatically be a second-term president, right? So there'll be a lame duck president, and that gets accelerated. So I think the concern is that they've really learned how to do the things they wanted to do the first time. For instance, get rid of Chapter 19, the independent dispute resolution mechanism for NAFTA, and that they'll be able to accomplish this time what they weren't last.
And how should businesses think about that? What are the consequences of that? And what can Canada do about it? Scenario planning is strategic planning. As we tell all of our clients at Eurasia Group, you have to have a series of plans based on your best tough assessment of the probable outcomes. And businesses in Canada need to plan for the worst and work for the best. Businesses in Canada are feeling very pressured already, slower growth, productivity concerns, but Canadians in general feel the pinch of inflation and just lower GDP per capita. So there's that saying, people in glass houses. And I think that that is something that Canadian businesses, we've had so many people come on the channel talk about capital gains, the lack of innovation, and they still look to the U.S. to invest. That's the growth market. Do our policies keep us competitive relative to the U.S.? How big of a risk is it that we are exacerbating a drain of talent, of business, of money to the U.S.?
Well, you have to look at that whenever you're making a policy in Ottawa. You have to put yourself in the shoes of a business person who's making a marginal call on an investment on one side of the border or the other. So you always have to keep a close eye on that. There's a certain kind of, there's a mood in the country that people seem predisposed to talk the country down. I'm not one of those people. I'm a very proud Canadian, and I think we have a lot to offer here. We live next to the most dynamic economy in the history of the world, the most innovative economy in the history of the world, and some people see that as a competitive threat. I see it as a huge opportunity, right? And there's no other country that we'd like to share a 10,000 kilometer border with than the United States. So my view, and I think the view of what you're hearing from a lot of the business people in the room, is sure, we've got our issues and we've got to manage those issues, But when you compare it to the issues that other countries are dealing with in other parts of the world, let's not lose sight of everything we have going for us either.
Well, let's talk about that with respect to capital gains. There's a lot of anger in this country. Former Finance Minister Bill Morneau himself said that he's not an advocate of this policy. I'd be curious on your 2 cents on that topic. You want to give it to me?
I bet you would be, but I've made a commitment to myself and my friends that I'm not going to be one of those people who goes on TV and tells them how to do their job. So I'll take a pass on that.
Well, then let's talk about the temperature around getting the rich to pay their fair share, because you're right, Canada is not an island. And in the US, even Biden has floated measures, maybe a capital gains tax on unrealized gains. So is this mood global?
Yes, it's very definitely global, and I think it's all derived from inflation. 2 years ago, when the inflation crisis started, we did a study of what happens to incumbent governments in inflationary environments. And what we found is that you're almost twice as likely to be defeated as an incumbent if you go to the polls within 24 to 36 months of inflation spiking. So in the meantime, in the interim period, we've seen it happen to governments of all ideological predispositions. You've seen it happen in Chile, you've seen it happen in Denmark, you've seen it, in Norway, you've seen it happen in Finland. The European elections are the latest example. Narendra Modi getting a smaller mandate than people largely expected him to. This is an inflationary effect that is having an impact on incumbents everywhere. So I think there's definitely a mood out there, and rightly so, because people feel as if, as you may have seen, I interviewed my friend David Axelrod for the crowd, and he said when people are sitting at a dinner table and their conversation is democracy, there's pretty much a chance, you can make a safe bet that they haven't had trouble putting food on that table, right? So people have migrated down the Maslow's hierarchy of needs. They're worried about the price of their groceries, and they're worried about whether they can afford their shelter. Those are super basic things that political leaders need to respond to.
So if that is a kind of a global mood, how does that wash up on the shores here in Canada? Does that basically guarantee a win for the Conservatives the next election?
Yeah, well, I mean, if the polls are to be believed, we're going to see a change in government. I think there's a lot of hockey left to play before that happens, but the wind is definitely in their sails for sure.